All right, let's jump into things. Where we are, 28th of August, 10:34. Sweet. Had a little look over the news. It wasn't a great deal over sort of last nice night, except for sort of like everyone was sort of touting about the sort of Nvidia earnings call kind of thing, which I don't cover stocks at all on that, but obviously impacting. Uh, well, I say impacting. There was a little bit of a flick up and down in that in sort of US equity markets, but really it was kind of a nothingness kind of thing. Anyway, sort of through the day yesterday, main one, as I was saying yesterday, was CPI in Australia, and whoa, that is a massive, massive beat to the top side. Like that is super hot jump. I mean, I was already sort of saying this is kind of a bit of a jump. I mean, if you look at the sort of how much this stuff moves. It's very, look, here we go for a little bit more. It's very much in the realm. Like they're never really missing by like a couple of points or something, like, point of a point of a percent kind of thing. And then to jump all the way back there, we're going back to August last year. I did actually have a look at this. So if you have a look on the graph, we can see that August always seems to come in fairly hot anyway. As you can see, August, this is in 24, and then a bit of a drop off over here, where we are, August here. I suppose a little bit of a spike up into October, but then sort of like dropped off over here. So, there's August, here's August, wherever it is here, and obviously now I've seen a bit of a jump up over here. But market didn't really sort of take too much notice. And yesterday I was saying in the video, and I sort of like obviously sort of summarized these things into kind of a bit of a dot point summary from after the analysis I do in the text. But I was like, I expected it happened pretty much as I expected. The jump up, look, I didn't expect that big a beat, to be honest. But Aussie jumped up about 10 points. It fluffed around 65, a bit over 65 for a bit, and then just got smashed into. I think it dropped about maybe 50 points or so from its high to its low yesterday. And this is the perfect example of how Aussie data runs. If you trade Aussie, this is what you need to understand, that sort of like we can have data that supports the idea of massive CPI print up higher, but it doesn't necessarily in that moment compute into Aussie appreciation in price. Now, there's a few things to unpack with that. One is that sort of like, yes, it's just one print, but that is a massive beat. So I would say that most likely, because obviously, like a lot of these people, but RBA particularly, love the talk of like, oh, we're going to take the cautious approach. And look, I think that's fair in this instance. I mean, they've been touting going for like quarter on quarter reductions for a while before they made their move. One monthly, or sort of like obviously year on year, but a monthly sort of print of the CPI, not the quarterly, jumping up. I don't think they're going to go, oh my God, wow, we've had one high print. You need to do a couple of these back to back to sort of say that, to show that it's actually not just a sort of abnormality and a little sort of bit of a flare up kind of thing. So I think that's why sort of, partly why Aussie didn't sort of like super run off it initially, of course. Obviously, we saw a push up sort of later on. But as I say, it's the tail end of what happens with the US dollar. And US dollar ran all through that session. Aussie got smacked all through that session. Doesn't matter if the CPI is hotter. It just sort of means that sort of we didn't drop even further. So I think, as I said, it dropped about 50 points from high to low. Had this come in lighter, had this come in cooler with US dollar running, well, we probably would have dropped maybe 70 or 80 points. But because we did have this as a sort of tick in the favour, it sort of retarded that move from what could have been 70, 80 point drop off to, as we saw, 50-point drop off. But as soon as US dollar sort of completed that Jackson Hole move, which I'll get to in a moment, we saw Aussie flip and turn around. People go, hold on, mate, that's right. US dollar selling off. CPI super hot over there. Higher chance maybe that they're going to hold. Well, probably not a high chance that they're going to hold. I don't think, as I said, I don't think they're going to change course just on that one print. But that's the feeling. That's the sort of the way that the market kind of would react to that bit of data. And Aussie just went straight back up. And now it's actually sort of closed up above 65, and we're looking at that 65.20 level to come in pretty soon. Apart from that, wasn't really sort of, it was pretty quiet on the sort of data front and that, as I said, a couple of speakers. Even today, we don't really have a great deal sort of coming out. capital expenditures quarter on quarter. Nothingness. It's not going to move the market. Aussie's on the bid at the moment. Tonight we've got US GDP and unemployment claims, and this will be the interesting one. I mean, GDP obviously, I call it like it's pretty much like a third tier bit of data, but the unemployment claims I think is going to be interesting. So if we can see this reduce, that'll be positive for US dollar. But of course, now that Powell sort of touted that jobs are at the forefront of what he's looking at in terms of sort of whether they're going to sort of move up the sort of cutting cycle, and of course September's the big one that they're all talking about. But NFP next Friday, that's the big dog one. But this is, I think, going to sort of maybe get a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction through this session tonight. So it's one to watch for at least as well. Then a couple other bits of data. We've got Waller. Waller speaking is one of the dissenters, so that's another thing that could be weighing on the Aussie, weighing on US dollar, sort of as he's very much a sort of pro-cut sooner rather than later kind of person. That's 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. So just before before I get up and do this analysis anyway. Cool. So again, still pretty light on it all, and then we got PCE, but again, I don't think this is going to be doing much coming into the end of the week, given what Powell said the other week. So quick, just look at this right here. So, and this is very, very brief because I don't bother really sort of covering this kind of stuff, but this is the E-minis, the S&P, so US 500, and this is the big one that everyone was sort of like touting and talking about overnight, and this is on a 4 hour. But as you can see, really gave a bit, not really a great deal. Yeah, just a little bit of a and then moved around like this. So everyone's like, oh wow, it's gonna be. And I think the earnings seem to come out and some ridiculous number, and they're touting that they're going to do even more, sort of 50 billion next year or next quarter or something along these lines. Like, but this whole sort of thing that everyone's like, oh, earnings are coming, earnings are coming. Well, that's the impact, and take it in context of where you are. It's a little blip. It's an absolute nothingness. All right. Anyway, on to more important things. We could have a look at gold actually to sort of start off because this is one that's sort of like yesterday. I was looking for this level down through here. I said sort of look if we can get down underneath 70, then that's fine. We might sort of roll down. I actually just put this in just as I was having a look this morning. But that was the kind of level that we were looking at yesterday. We had this little wedge forming, broke through it, which is fine because I said, it's sort of like, it seems to be the sort of theme at the moment, despite supposedly the Chinese buying, through Asia, we're getting a bit of a sell-off in gold, and then through Euro session to US sessions, we get a bit of a buy-up. And it seems to be a little bit of the reaction that we've sort of been getting recently. So of course, that was the Cook comments. Anyway, so where are we at here? Pop that line back here. So broke the wedge, unable to get through that sort of little trigger point. I think this is still a level to really beat. If you're going to see any sort of movement down, till it's above that, it's still on the bid and it's still pushing up there. To me, it seemed very like we were always around here, and I kind of sort of thought, look, you're so close to 3,400. It's a bit odd that you don't at least test up around that level. And I think overnight, I think look at the 99.4 or something, 99.3, like right on the cusp of it all. And you've got this previous high over here. So if we step back a little bit, you can kind of see that. So obviously, this is where the sellers were recently. So that's a bit of a top end side for you here. But you might sort of think there might be some stops up or over here. So even if it wants to sort of go down, the course of action typically with these kind of things would be that to do that. So as in like take out all those sort of textbook stops, have these sort of wick kind of areas up over the top here, and then break down. I don't think we're going to see something that necessarily just goes straight back down here. And the flip side of this is obviously because this little move through here is actually a little bit bullish, that if you close up above 34, so if you close at 34.10, well, you're opening up the door to sort of really test these 34.30s. So a close up, let's just put an alert at the highs. Targeting 34.10. Targeting 34.10. Is that 34.10? Targeting 34. So, yeah, 34.30. That's good enough. Because what you're sort of seeing here, obviously, this is a level where the sellers are stepping in. They're sort of coming in. Let's actually make it just a normal zone. It's all the same. Um, these are your sellers sitting here, sitting here. That's fine. Coming back up here, they're obviously going to give it a shot. So I don't think we're necessarily just going to charge right through. But you would expect it at least to sort of come up and test this zone here. It's very close to it all. But it is sort of setting up. This could potentially be, like, as you can see, this top side here, this is kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4 touches here now. It is grinding through the top here. RSI is actually looking pretty good. If it does want to sort of push through here, you can see that this could push up through here, and we could see get a charge up over here. So very much in the count that we could see a little bit of a topside move here to try and sort of clear out some of this stuff. It really, again, look, it depends on what we sort of see the US dollar here. Like US dollar moved yesterday, it had a pretty good run, impacted gold. What did we drop? $20. You know what I mean? Then sells right back off, and we bounce up like $25. So, it's fairly tight little ranges that you're sort of moving here. So if we see US dollar sort of break down and sort of, it got slapped basically as soon as it sort of closed, hit that sort of level, the Jackson Hole Speech level, where we saw US dollar just absolutely drop like a stone. As soon as it hit that, bang! There was a little inverted, no, not inverted, sorry. There's a little head and shoulders that formed around that, and then just boom, that's all she wrote, and just undid the whole whole day afterwards. So if we see a continuation of that move to the downside, that's going to be the same time that we're going to see a little bit of a test and potential break up to the top side here. Like, US dollar, as I covered yesterday, is in a larger sort of range. It's now back at the midway point. So if it goes to test the bottom of the range, that's going to be the time that we see this thing test out to the top side over here. If it holds, yet again, the middle of the range, so it's back at a point where it's, I'll cover this in a moment, but it's back at a point where market has bought it up twice already. If it holds that level, well, that's when we're going to see gold come back into these sort of lower levels here. And as I keep saying, I still think that is the level it wants to beat if it's going to get down underneath that. So potential for a little bit of a sort of wedge setting up here. Get rid of this one here for now anyway. Should it keep on the underside of sort of 34.10, I think there's higher sort of chance that we just sort of get a little bit of a sort of bounce around this area here. I'm not sort of at this point until we sort of see US dollar really sort of commit and break its range one way or the other. And NFP next week, ADP, jolts, these kind of things, they're going to be the ones that sort of that push it around. Till we get those to break, I don't think we're going to get any major breaks. So look, it could sort of shoot up to 34.30, but I don't imagine you're going to get any breakthrough there. That's quite a significant level for gold, but certainly at the moment it's holding up quite resilient. We saw obviously US dollar undid Jackson Hole level. Gold has just pushed away in the other direction. We've seen a couple of other things. Euro, obviously, sort of like if DXY did, Euro did. But yeah, they're about the only things actually I think that have undone that Jackson Hole move because equities haven't, Aussie hasn't, and obviously gold is pushing in the other direction there as well. So on the front foot here, it does look like it could want to sort of at least test up over here, but if this is like some sort of breakout, it's not really, it's not really sort of firing. It's not like, not certainly, look at how gold moves when it breaks out. You know what I mean? Like it sort of flies up. This is very cautiously grinding. So this is what causes wedges. Like it makes a new high, but then it'll pull back. Make a new high, pull back. It's not that this kind of, what's a good example, like this kind of move here. Like, you know what I mean? This would be your little breakout level here. As you can see, it fires through, pulls back, fires through again. This one's very sheepishly moving up over here. It could get to a point where it sort of fishes for stops and gets a little push up there, but that'll be the time to tell whether the market's going to run with it or not. And as I said, I think if US dollar goes to the bottom of its range, then I think that could be an indicator that we're sort of going to at least test out the top side here up into the 34s. Onto DXY with that. So as I said, look, this is the level where we had Jackson Hole kick off. Where put on a better level here. So I had that little alert set right here. We can just put it back here again, just so for what it's worth. But as you can see, like it hit that Jackson Hole level, like took an hour, not even an hour. I think it dropped in like 15 minutes or whatever. But this is the move. You saw the buyers move up, yada, 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 back up to the top side and into the top side of the range. So timing was off. I thought it might have come up here a bit quicker, but that was the level. This little guy over here, right over there. So that was the level that you're kind of targeting. And you can see as soon as they're like, okay, that's fine, we've done that now, bang, they absolutely stepped on it there. There was no other sort of real reason, as I can see. Like there was no data coming out last night. There wasn't any sort of headlines or stories or anything to sort of justify a sell-off like this, other than just the technical completion of that move. And although this is a bit sort of a scrappy thing, but on the 4 hour, you might be able to see it a bit better. We are still just in this big box range. And this is what I was saying when we were down here the other day, that this could just end up being a bit of a range that we move through. And as you can see, we're back into that midway point where the market has bought it up after the Cook comments, the little inverted head and shoulders, and now we're back there yet again. So it has sort of slowed down a little bit into it. It had a little bit of a gap down on the open, but it is attempting to hold it. That's fine. The alert is still the same, set underneath. If you go underneath, this is what I'm talking about, that there's a good chance. Look, there's a little bit of a sort of vague support level just down underneath it here, which also comes in at the 61%. Is that? Are we going down or up here? That's the low, that's the highs back up here. Look, just to clear it up, we can get rid of that now. That'd be your move up the top over here. So this, again, yeah, it comes in like 61% of this move back and forth here. But as you can see, hits the highs, hits the bottoms, hits the highs, hit the bottom, hit the high. There's a good chance that we do come back and at least sort of test the bottom here. If it does manage to hold around here, well, I think that sort of says that, okay, that we could move up and this could be a new little sort of range within a range kind of thing. But certainly for the moment, it has sort of brought it up here a couple of times, as we've seen recently, apart from that sort of Jackson Hole speech where it just absolutely chopped through. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 times it's held this more often than not. Like we sort of shot through, bought up, shot through, bought up, shot through, bought up, and we obviously said it's gap down on the open and it's held this level here. So maybe if we chuck a little alert just above that last 4 hour, that would be enough to sort of say, hey, okay, they're holding this level. Midway supports. If it can hold it, so they're the two little areas I'd say in between this session. It needs to hold above 98.07, but if it can break above 98.26, I would say that this is, again, just supporting the idea that this is where the buyers are. They're happy to hold it, and we're just going to push back up. And as you can see how fast these moves are coming through this area, there's a good chance that we just sort of like, dribble back up over here as well. Look, there's not really a lot to sort of stand in its way. We got and unemployment numbers coming out tonight. That's a kind of, I mean, they're out weekly. And you got GDP. And so these sort of bits of data, they're not going to be market moving necessarily, or market shaping, I should say. They will probably have an impact. They always have a little bit of an impact, but I think the market's really just going to be in a waiting pattern until NFP next week, because that's the big one. If we get a strong NFP next week, well, it says that sort of, Powell, sorry, fix that up. I'm trying to sort of not word it as in like one of those, well, what does that tell us? But what does it tell us? Well, that tells us answering your own questions. I sort of find very obnoxious. Anyway, the point is that if we get a strong jobs number next week, it means that the jobs are at the forefront of what Powell's sort of looking for as to whether the Fed may cut in September. Now, if that's at the forefront and that's not an issue, i.e. strong NFP numbers, Well, that removes the necessity necessarily to cut in September. No, it's not to sort of say that they won't cut because everyone's touting, yep, it's a sure thing, great, move on. And they still could, but it's just how the market will digest and react to the news. And the point is that sort of if they have a strong number, it reduces the sort of certainty, so to speak, of how much they price in the idea there will be a cut. So you'll see US dollar sort of push up a little bit with that. You'll see sort of gold will come off. You'll see Aussie will come off. And this will be because people are sort of going, well, it's not as sure a thing as everybody is sort of banking on and pricing into the market. The flip side of that is if you get a weak number, if we get another sort of weak number on the NFP, well, that just sort of kind of confirms what people already think. It's pretty much sort of guarantees a sort of a cut in September, and that will sort of basically just slap US dollar basically. Um, Obviously, it's already on its knees, but if that data's coming out and it's anywhere in this kind of vicinity down here, there's a good chance we go down to test these lower levels down over here, and then obviously you see what happens when they actually cut. But the point is, it's sort of like it's just about how the market is going to price it and what their sort of perception of what will be happening moving forward is, and they're the kind of outcomes that we're looking at. But that's next week. So the here and now is above these two little zones here. So let's put a little arrow here. And obviously this one here for the day. They're the two levels that I'm sort of looking at. There's ranges all over the place here. But yeah, I think so. If you can get above here, guarantees that you're holding this as the midway support. Break down below, then I would say there's a good chance you probably, look, you might get a bit of a bounce through this area here, 61%, plus it is a little area that the market has sort of valued it before, but most likely you'll be targeting this bottom area down here at 97.70. Move along, we got Aussie, and this is just yet another one that's just refuses to sort of just sit down. It just sort of keeps pushing up. So it did have that big break. What was this? This must be some sort of measured move that I put on here. Don't know what from. Hmm. Uh, Too many things, can't remember what I've sort of drawn from. Okay, so where we at? Look, had this little range through here. Look, we'll hold this for 2 seconds. So this is the little support area that we did have. If we can move this, you can see that we had a little range down the bottom over here. It must have been on a 1 hour or something. Yeah. So it's the 1 hour support, so we could see did its little close out the bottom here. So we had CPI yesterday, little spike up, and then bang, sold into. As soon as that level got hit, Jackson Hole Speech level, I put a post on X at the same time. That is the exact same time that we saw, if you can see, 9 o'clock, bang, exact same time that we moved up over here. See, and this is the thing that's sort of like, although Aussie's not part of DXY, you can use DXY as a barometer for the broader markets, sort of call it attitude towards US dollar. And the second they started selling US dollar, although Aussie's not part of DXY, it's certainly not immune to what's happening with the US dollar. So US dollar was running even on strong CPI from Aussie, and Aussie went down. US dollar gets sold off, or DXY gets sold off, Aussie appreciates, bang, up to the top side here. And that's a very fast sort of pushback up. I mean, if you look at that, it was probably about 1.27 or so, I'd say. That doesn't have it marked in here. 127, yeah. Yeah, so pretty much right. Coming up there, very close to 127 extension. 127% extension from the drop down from yesterday after CPI, bang, and a very big sort of push back up to the top over here. So look, it's certainly bouncing back into it there. As I said, let's watch what happens with DXY. There's a little bit of a sort of almost like a expanding kind of megaphone pattern kind of happening here. Put on 4 hour, can we see it a bit better? So let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. And okay, got rid of this for now. Bang, clear it up a little bit. So we do have a little bit of a sort of expanding sort of megaphone, which could be seen as a bit of a reversal pattern. We did sort of get above this 4 hour and seems to have held up here fairly well. I would say this is probably the level it needs to hold. Back down underneath here. Deeper correction. So where's that? At 94, which probably stands to truth in that because we always see the 90s show up here. So underneath 94, I would say that this is probably going to come back down, targeting over here. We've got that support, which was that 1 hour support. You can see as it shows up as a 4 hour wick down, unable to close down. Up over there, that's your next level down. Should we see US dollar push up? Look, as I said, I'm not expecting any sort of fireworks in that prior to next week and that. So at the moment, it is in a little sort of bullish momentum. Drag anything off this. I mean, technically that is something, but I don't think that sort of seems to be anything at the moment. So I think sort of at the moment, while it sort of holds above here, you could look for a little pullbacks and then maybe sort of continuation. The next level of sort of resistance just up here, we can select this, bang, is above at 65.20. We saw the sort of like couple attempts on the way down here. 20s is another one. 20s, 90s, and 60s are the sort of repeating kind of levels that we see with Aussie a lot. So we've got these ones sort of marked through here. So we kind of see that obviously, there's a 20s down over here. Moving up and that, we can see that obviously through here, it was very much trying to hold these 90s area. It's around that 65 zone, and it's pushed back up the top over here. So at the moment, currently sort of coming up and testing that 61% line of that drop down with a little bit of a sort of horizontal just up above that as well. Yeah. Bang through into those 20s there. So I think sort of any sort of upside here may be a little bit sort of limited. I don't think we're just going to go flying up the top over here, but we'll see how we go. Just watching equities and gold are just getting a little bit of a hit at the moment. Back onto these other charts. So yeah, look, I think there's a little bit of a range up the top over here. If we go down onto a lower time frame, you can see it trying to sort of bounce and hold along here. To me, I would say that this is probably just going to come back down to these levels over here. I'd be reluctant to buy this over here at the moment, particularly sort of with potential sort of US dollar sort of just continuing to range and hold that level. I think it's going to need US dollar to really sell off to sort of give it a push up to these higher levels over here. Look, again, like anything, I could be wrong and it comes back and it's over here tomorrow. But yeah, at the moment, I'd be reluctant to buy this. To me, it's almost like this isn't a perfect kind of pattern, but I mean, you have technically got lower, 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 higher, 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 higher. So it is a megaphone pattern. Megaphone patterns, I don't really sort of, they're kind of like to me like diamond tops. They're kind of a pretty sort of hit and miss. But if they do work in their sort of actual sense, they are reversals. And that would sort of lead you obviously to coming down over here. And I'm still surprised that some of these things haven't taken out that Jackson Hole level as well. I think there's a few things going on in Europe, which obviously sort of led to that being a little bit weaker, and obviously your euro making up 60% or whatever it does of, 60% of DXY. That's probably why you saw those things move a little bit faster than some of these other things. But I'd still sort of be tired. These kind of moves like this, I think these are still magnets. I think this is definitely an area that I'd want to sort of see Aussie come, even if it was to sort of break out. I think it's got unfinished business in these areas. So undoing that sort of move there, I think would be something to target. But at the moment, obviously, bang, breakout, and it's out to the top side here. Doesn't mean you can't move up a little bit higher, but I just think that it's got unfinished business down over here. Move along, we've got silver. Silver, as I say, I mean, what do you want to do with it? It's kind of bouncing off the top of this. They bounce perfectly off the top of this thing here. Horizontals coming into play, stuck down underneath this other horizontal here. It's just an ugly chart. I haven't traded, I say this almost every day, actually, but I haven't traded silver in a while. To me, it's just, nah, it's too much chop fest. I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with sort of chop fest sort of stuff, but yeah, I mean, if you stand back on it, put on the 4 hour. I mean, look, it's still very much at its highs and it's consolidating up over here, but they're some very wild sort of swings. And, you'd want to see this thing take out, obviously, 39, 39.50. They're the levels you want to beat. And big things are going to happen if you can get above 39.50. But obviously, the market's sort of super cautious about it because every time it runs towards it, it runs away at the same time. So another sort of maybe. That's a little bit of a sort of resistance there. So again, just yet another potential kind of line. This almost lines up pretty well with this for this to be a bit of a channel down here, actually, doesn't it? Yeah, I'd be happy to call that a channel. Get rid of that behind there. Pop those highs with those highs. You kind of got 1, 2, 3 touches up here. You got 2 down over here. Yeah, I think that could be something you sort of work off. This one, make a little bit smaller just because I'm not quite sure if I really sort of trust that so much. But yeah, I suppose that could be sort of a little bit of a channel there, which means it could give you a bit of a topside target and pushed out could give you a little bit of a downside target there as well, should this thing continue to sort of dribble down over here. A little bit of a breakthrough there. This is what I mean. It's just there's too many sort of conflicting things. Then you got the horizontals to deal with. It's just a headache in my opinion. But look, it's still up. It's a whisker from the highs, so you can't be anything but pretty bullish on it. But again, it's just one of those things. Does it go in one direction or does it pull back deeper to reload to then go up higher? So yeah, it's on the back burner for me. Copper actually broke down yesterday. Found a little bit of buying sort of support. As we saw, there's a little bit of a sort of test down underneath here. So this is the move that I'm kind of looking for down here. These are the real big zones down here, I think. Sort of, as I said, this little channel where it was kind of dribbling up, tested the underside of it, lower low after that. I would say this is just destined to sort of dribble down a little bit further. And sort of come back down, test these areas over here. If you see buyers step in significantly over here, well, that gives you a bit of a double bottom, like in a bigger sort of sense than that. Like you'd have to put it onto at least a daily to see this, but that doesn't look particularly great, to be honest. I mean, it's already overbought and it's starting to dribble back down here. But you in this sort of third, kind of getting into this third leg here at the moment, whereas you've had your move down, you found support, you move back up. You want to see what happens as it comes down here. At the moment, it's held once, held twice, but I want to get there, and that's the kind of move you'd want to sort of see for this to turn around. I think it needs to honour a little bit more of the size of this sell down here. Like you can't even see the top of it. Look at that sell down. Like that's just insane. And this is why sort of these things are just being put on the back burner because after this insane kind of movement, look at the size of these daily candles. They're just dribbling, and it's not providing anything much of a trade really, to be honest. So where are we at? 11:07. So it's yeah, it's holding for now, but again, look, I think sort of if you want to, let's put a box around this one as well. Looking forward to summer being over, to be honest. But yeah, here's a little box here. Break above here. I think that's your little short-term target. Expect sellers to sort of come back in from here. Most likely, though, I would say a little test down over here. If it does hold, then we could have a larger kind of area, and it could start to build. It could be seen as it's starting to build a base in formation down here for a base, and then we could see a move up. But I think the fact of how hard that has come down, I don't think this is really like, hey, let's give them another shot, like as in give the sellers another effort. I don't think that's really justified it yet. So I still think we need at least a test down here at the lows around sort of like 441 before we can sort of confirm that this is a sort of safe structural base that the buyers can then sort of go, okay, here's our breakout point, and we can start to move on. So still in snooze for the time being. And another one that's just getting continually smacked down here. I don't know where all the drawings have gone on this, but maybe just the 4 hour. Ah, that's right. We got rid of them on the daily, so we could see that sort of trend line yesterday. Look, it's dribbling along here again. Yesterday, same sort of thing. Came down here, tested it, bought straight back up. Same with the DXY, and then found sellers. Bang, found sellers very hard. So I would say this does look like it's consolidating to have another leg lower, which could be actually beneficial for Aussie. Should this thing move down here, because obviously sort of see USD CNH, yuan, as a proxy for Aussie. And stronger the yuan, um, the more resilience Aussie will have. So should you break down underneath here, let's put an alert under. Eyes on Aussie. But as you can see, very quickly, if this thing sort of shoots down, it's got the ability to turn on a dime and then fly back up. Not massively, of course, but even intra-session. So I think that's a little area for it at the moment. But certainly, range, break, retesting didn't quite get up to where we had it marked out, but retesting underside, and now it's just back in its next little grind range. I mean, it's a grinding pair. Like, it's not a big trending pair generally. So we'll see how this one sort of continues along. All right, that's it from me.